You are tuned into Justice Insight Cam. Here, we examine genuine law enforcement encounters through actual bodycam footage. Rather than just watching, we investigate the underlying truths, legal principles, and key lessons of every stop. Let's pursue justice together.
Officer, I'm EMS. I'm in uniform. I'm just trying to get home.
Step away from the vehicle, now. Hands up! Keep them up!
The first thing you hear is the click, not a gun, a body cam. That tiny plastic chirp that tells you this moment is being written into evidence, whether anyone wants it to be or not. The frame is jittery. A flashlight beam swings across the road. A squad car door slams, and in the middle of that beam, standing beside a sedan with the hazard lights blinking, there's a man in a paramedic uniform, reflective stripes across his chest, a clipped radio, a name patch, hands open, and you can hear his voice, tight but controlled. "Officer, I'm EMS. I'm in uniform. I'm just trying to get home." There's a pause, just long enough to feel like a choice. Then the officer answers. "Step away from the vehicle, now." The paramedic does. The officer's voice rises. "Hands up! Hands up! Keep 'em up!" And that's the moment the story locks in. See, because what happens next isn't just a traffic stop. It's a collision between what a man is and what someone in power decides he is. And that decision, caught on camera, would eventually cost a city $2.4 million. Not because the video was dramatic, because it was ordinary, because it showed how fast respect can vanish, how quickly a uniform can stop meaning anything, and how easily a routine interaction can become a lawsuit, a settlement, and a public reckoning. So tonight, we're going to walk through the stop from the inside out, minute by minute. We're going to look at what the camera saw, what the officer said, what the paramedic did, and the quiet line where policy ends and something else begins. Because once you see that line, you can't unsee it. Jordan Miles wasn't doing anything heroic when the lights hit him. He wasn't racing an ambulance. He wasn't trying to break a record. He was doing the least glamorous part of the job, going home. Jordan was 34, a paramedic in a mid-sized American city we'll call Brookfield. Not a huge metro, not a small town. The kind of place where everyone says, it's pretty safe, until you look closely at what they mean by safe. Jordan had worked EMS for 11 years, long enough to know that most emergencies don't look like movies. Most of the time, it's a grandmother who can't breathe, a diabetic whose blood sugar crashed, a kid who fell off a bike and hit his head, a drunk man who's more embarrassed than injured. And then, every now and then, it's a night that follows you. That night started at 6:12 p.m. Jordan's shift began like it always did. Coffee that tasted burned, a quick check of the rig, in restocking gloves, gauze, oxygen tubing. His partner, a newer EMT named Kayla, joked about how the station always smelled like disinfectant and old chili. Jordan smiled, quiet, tired, because he'd already been on 3 calls that day. He'd been called in early to cover for a co-worker, and when you've been doing this job long enough, you stop measuring time in hours. You measure it in calls. You measure it in sirens. You measure it in how many times you've watched someone's worst day from inches away. By 11:40 p.m., Jordan had one thing in his body, exhaustion, and one thing in his head, get home. His uniform was still on because he'd been running. Not the kind of running that makes you look athletic, the kind that makes you look like you've been carrying other people's problems across rooms. He'd responded to a late call, an apartment complex, 3rd floor, no elevator. A man in his 40s with chest pain, sweating, pale, trying to act tough. Jordan did what he always did. He talked, he assessed, he placed leads. He watched the monitor and read the patient's fear like a language. He got the man to the hospital. He gave the report, he cleaned up, and then, just before midnight, he got into his car. Not an ambulance, A regular sedan with a cracked corner on the bumper and a half-empty bottle of water in the cup holder. The kind of car that says, normal life. Jordan's route home cut through a stretch of road that hugged the edge of a wooded park. On the map, it was quicker. In real life, it was darker. No streetlights for long sections. Trees leaning in. The kind of road where your headlights feel small. Now Jordan turned down his radio and let the hum of tires fill the silence. He had one hand on the wheel, one on the heat, and the tired, floating feeling you get after adrenaline finally lets go. Then the flashing lights appeared behind him. Red, blue, sudden, bright enough to turn his rearview mirror into a strobe. Jordan blinked hard. His first thought wasn't fear, it was confusion. He checked his speed, he checked his lane, he checked his dash. Then he did what responsible adults do. He slowed, he signaled, he pulled over, hazards on, hands visible, and he waited. The officer who stepped out of the squad car was named Grant Heller, 38, 8 years on the department, a reputation among some co-workers for being proactive. That word can mean a lot of things. Sometimes it means diligent, sometimes it means aggressive. Sometimes it means you look for trouble until you find it. That night, Officer Heller's body cam was already running when he walked up. His flashlight was raised like a pointer. It swept across Jordan's interior, across the dashboard, across the seats, across Jordan's face, and you can hear the small shift in the officer's tone when he reaches the window. Not friendly, not neutral, testing. License and registration. Jordan's voice is polite. Yes, sir. 1 second. He moves slowly, because every adult knows the rule, don't move fast around a cop. His wallet comes out. His registration is in the glove box. And because Jordan has been trained for emergencies, he narrates what he's doing. My registration's in the glove compartment. I'm going to open it. A pause. Then the officer says, go ahead. Jordan opens the glove box. On the flashlight beam flares, and for a fraction of a second, the camera catches it. A black medical bag tucked near the passenger footwell. Not a weapon, not contraband. A trauma kit Jordan sometimes carried because he couldn't turn off the part of his brain that prepared. Officer Heller's flashlight locks on it. What's that? Jordan answers plainly. My jump bag. I'm a paramedic. There it is. The sentence that should make this easy. I'm a paramedic. Jordan even gestures slightly toward his chest. The uniform, the patch, the reflective stripes. But on the body cam, you can see the officer's posture change. Not relax, tighten. You're a paramedic, Heller repeats, like he's tasting the words. Yes, sir. Brookfield EMS. Why are you out here? I'm coming from a call. I'm heading home. Heller doesn't say, okay. He says, Ike, step out of the vehicle. Jordan hesitates for half a second, not refusing, just surprised. Then he nods. Okay, I'll step out. He sets the wallet on the dash. He opens the door. He places both feet on the pavement. And then the officer's voice snaps, fast, sharp. Hands up! Hands up! Keep 'em up! Jordan freezes. His hands rise. And you can hear it now. Something in his breathing. Not panic, calculation. He's trying to understand the rules of a game that just changed. Officer, what's going on? Heller's answer is not an explanation. It's a command. Turn around. Face away from me. Jordan does. Walk backward. Slow. Jordan does. His boots scrape. His radio crackles lightly against his chest. He's still in uniform. Still clearly EMS. Still being treated like a threat. If you're watching right now, I want you to drop one word in the comments. Where? Where are you watching from? City, state, country. Because stories like this don't happen in a vacuum. They happen in real neighborhoods, on real roads, to real people. And if you believe accountability matters, especially when it's captured on video, hit like and subscribe, not because it changes what happened that night, but because it changes what happens after. On the body cam, you can hear Jordan trying to keep his voice steady. I'm a paramedic. My ID is on my chest. My badge is right here. He doesn't say it with attitude. He says it like a man who genuinely believes the facts should matter. Officer Heller doesn't look, or if he looks, it doesn't change his decision. You got anything on you? No, sir. Any weapons? No, sir. Any drugs? No, sir. Heller steps closer. You hear the sound of gear shifting, boots on gravel. Then the officer says the line that later becomes a headline. Don't lie to me. Jordan swallows. I'm not. And in that quiet moment, you can feel the insult, because Jordan's entire job is trust. When someone calls 911, they're trusting you to show up. When someone is bleeding, they're trusting your hands. When someone can't breathe, they're trusting your decisions. And here he is, still in the uniform of trust, being told, don't lie to me. Officer Heller reaches for Jordan's wrists. Hands behind your back. Jordan complies. Metal clicks. Handcuffs. Not a pat down, not a quick check. Full restraints. And Jordan's voice changes. Not louder, just more urgent. Officer, please, I'm literally in uniform. Why am I in cuffs? Heller answers with a phrase that sounds official, but explains nothing. Officer safety. 2 words that can justify almost anything if no one challenges them. Jordan's breathing is audible. He tries again. Can you tell me what I'm being detained for? Heller says, you're being detained. That's all you need to know right now. Jordan looks toward the squad car. He can't turn his head much. The cuffs pull. He says something that, in hindsight, sounds like the core of the entire case. I don't feel safe. And that's where the story gets heavy, because the person saying it isn't a suspect. He's a paramedic, a medical professional, a man trained to help, and he's telling a police officer, I don't feel safe. What do you think should happen at that point? Do you think the officer should de-escalate, verify identity, call a supervisor, or do you think the officer should double down? Because what happens next is the difference between a routine stop and a $2.4 million settlement. Officer Heller radios something you can't fully hear. Dispatch crackles. The officer's voice is clipped. He's asking for backup. In the body cam footage, the road looks emptier now. The woods feel closer. Jordan stands near the rear of his car, cuffed, staring down the road like he's hoping someone, anyone, will drive by. And you can hear something else in his voice. Not just fear, humiliation, because being cuffed isn't just physical restraint, it's a message. It tells you you are not in control. It tells anyone who drives by. You did something wrong. It stains your identity in public. Jordan tries to keep talking. I can call my supervisor. I can call my station. I can show you my ID. Heller replies, you should have thought about that before you got stopped. Jordan pauses. Then carefully, he says, I didn't do anything. What did you stop me for? Heller answers, your tag light's out. A tag light, a small bulb, a technicality, the kind of thing you usually hear as a casual warning. Instead, it has become handcuffs on a dark road. Jordan's jaw tightens. He says, I can fix that. I didn't even know. Heller says, you don't talk right now. A second squad car arrives, then a third. More flashing lights, more bodies, more uniforms, more power. And suddenly, Jordan, still in his paramedic uniform, looks small, because the scene is no longer about a broken light. It's about control. One of the arriving officers, a younger guy, asks, what's going on? Heller says, he's being uncooperative. Jordan's head snaps slightly. I've been cooperative, he says, and you can hear it. He's trying not to sound angry, because anger would be used against him. That's the part most people don't understand. The emotional math, how you calculate every syllable when you know the wrong tone can justify the wrong response. Another officer finally looks at Jordan's chest. The patch, the name, the ID badge. He's got EMS on him, the officer says. Heller's answer is immediate. Doesn't mean anything. That sentence matters, because it reveals the real issue, not what Jordan was, what Heller believed, or refused to believe. Jordan tries one more time. My name is Jordan Miles. I work for Brookfield EMS. My supervisor is... Shut up, Heller says. And now the air changes, because shut up is not instruction. It's contempt. It's the sound of someone telling you, your identity does not count here. A supervisor arrives 10 minutes later. Sergeant Paula Rains, 52, 2 decades on the job. The kind of person who's learned to read scenes fast. Her body cam turns on as she walks up. She looks at Jordan, she looks at the paramedic uniform, she looks at the cuffs, then she looks at Heller. What's the reason for cuffs? Heller says, he was acting suspicious. There's a bag in the car. Rains says, a bag. Heller says, could be anything. Rains turns back to Jordan. Sir, UEMS? Jordan's voice is tight. Yes, ma'am. I'm a paramedic. I just got off shift. My ID is right here. Rains steps closer and reads his badge. Jordan watches her eyes. This is the moment he's waiting for. The moment someone in authority finally sees what is obvious. Rains nods. And then she says something that sounds simple, but it changes the entire temperature. Why didn't we verify this before cuffing him? Silence. You can hear cars passing in the distance. You can hear Jordan exhale like he's been holding his breath for an hour. Heller shifts. He wasn't cooperating, he says. Rains doesn't argue. She doesn't shout. She just says, remove the cuffs. The younger officer reaches for the key. Click. Metal loosens. Jordan rubs his wrists. Red marks in the shape of a circle. Not a broken bone, not blood, but a bruise that will matter later. Because the law doesn't just look at injury, it looks at reason. Rains turns to Jordan. I apologize for the inconvenience, she says. Inconvenience. That word lands strangely. Because being handcuffed on a dark road while wearing the uniform of a first responder is not an inconvenience. It's a message. Jordan nods anyway, because he's still calculating, still deciding what is safe to say. He asks quietly, am I free to go? Rains says, yes. Then she looks at Heller and says, Lo, we'll talk about this. Jordan drives home with his wrists burning. He doesn't speed. He doesn't blast music. He drives like the road is fragile. When he gets home, he sits in his car for a full minute before opening the door. Inside, his apartment is quiet. A small living room, a pair of boots by the door, a framed picture on the wall, Jordan and his mother at his graduation from paramedic school. He drops his keys into a bowl, he washes his hands, and then he sees it, the red line around his wrist, and the physical proof that something happened, and for the first time that night, he lets himself feel the anger. Not explosive, focused, because Jordan is not a man who wants revenge. He's a man who wants reality acknowledged. He calls his supervisor first, not because it's required, because in EMS, chain of command is part of survival. His supervisor listens, long and quiet, then says, do you want to file a complaint? Jordan pauses. Here's the moment most people don't see. Because filing a complaint isn't a dramatic act. It's paperwork. It's interviews. It's repeating the story until it feels like you're bleeding it out. It's being questioned. It's being doubted. It's being told in polite ways that you should move on. Jordan answers, yes. And in that word is a decision. I'm not letting this become just another story that disappears. The next week becomes a slow grind. Jordan meets with internal affairs. He describes the stop. He describes the cuffs. He describes the way the officer said, shut up, like Jordan's voice was a problem. The investigator nods, takes notes, asks questions that sound neutral but feel sharp. Did you raise your voice? Did you make sudden movements? "Did you refuse any commands?" Jordan answers carefully, because he knows how narratives get built. A small detail becomes non-compliance. A question becomes argument. A human reaction becomes aggression. Meanwhile, Jordan's co-workers hear about it. Some are supportive, some are uncomfortable, because people who haven't lived it often want to treat it like a misunderstanding, a fluke, a bad night. But Jordan doesn't want sympathy, he wants accountability. And then, 2 weeks later, he gets a call. His attorney, because yes, he got an attorney, says, "We got the footage." Jordan sits down. His living room suddenly feels smaller. The attorney says, "I'm going to warn you, it's hard to watch." Jordan thinks he's prepared. He's not, because on video, your own fear looks foreign, your own voice sounds younger, and the humiliation is louder than you remember. They watch, they listen, they pause at key moments, the commands, the cuffs, the dismissive tone. The line doesn't mean anything. Jordan's attorney says, "This is not going away." Jordan asks, "What happens now?" The attorney answers, "Now we see who tells the truth when the camera is on." The lawsuit is filed 3 months later. Not a dramatic press conference, just a complaint in federal court. It alleges unlawful detention, violation of civil rights, and, critically, a pattern of discriminatory treatment. The city responds the way cities often respond. They deny, they defend, they claim the officer acted within policy. They use phrases like reasonable suspicion. They talk about split-second decisions. But here's the problem. The camera shows there was time. There was time to verify, time to look at the badge, time to call dispatch, time to treat a uniformed professional like a person. Instead, there were handcuffs. And when the body cam footage becomes public, after a media request and a court fight, it spreads the way real footage always spreads. Fast, unstoppable. A clip on social media, a headline, a local news segment, then national commentary. And this is where the story shifts from Jordan versus Officer Heller to Brookfield versus its own reflection. People argue online. Some say, the officer was just being careful. Some say, Jordan should have complied more. Some say, he did comply, that's the point. And then there are the people who watch it and feel something in their chest. Not because they've been Jordan, because they've watched someone be Jordan. At a city council meeting, a resident stands up and says, "If you can do that to a paramedic in uniform, what do you do to people with nothing?" That question lands, because it's the question behind every body cam scandal, not just what happened, but what it reveals. Jordan is asked to speak. He doesn't want to. He's not trying to be famous. He's trying to work. But his attorney tells him, if you stay silent, someone else will tell your story for you. So Jordan stands at a microphone. He wears a plain shirt, no uniform, no patch. Because he doesn't want the city to pretend this was about a mistake with a uniform. He says, "I've saved people who didn't look like me. I've treated officers. I've treated strangers. I've treated everyone the same. And that night, I was treated like my uniform didn't matter." He pauses. Then he says the line that makes the room go quiet. "I wasn't afraid of the dark woods. I was afraid of the people with the lights. The city's lawyers push for settlement talks. Because trials are unpredictable. Because juries are human. Because body cam footage is persuasive in a way that legal arguments can't always match. And because $2.4 million is expensive. But not as expensive as a public trial that forces every policy and every pattern into daylight. So they negotiate. Months pass. Depositions happen. Officer Heller is questioned under oath. Well, he claims he didn't notice the uniform. He claims Jordan's tone was aggressive. He claims the bag concerned him. And then the plaintiff's attorney plays the tape. And the room hears Heller say, "Doesn't mean anything." It's one of those moments where words become their own trap. Because if the uniform doesn't mean anything, then what does? What will? Jordan is deposed too. He sits under harsh office lighting. He answers questions about his job, his training, his history. He is asked again and again to justify his own reaction, to prove he deserved dignity. And if you've ever been through something like that, something where you know the truth, but you still have to prove it, you know how exhausting it is. This is where I want to ask you directly. If you were Jordan, would you have settled? Would you have insisted on trial? Would you have wanted the officer fired? Or would you have wanted the city to change policy? Tell me what you think, because this is the hardest part of these cases. Not the outrage, the outcomes. The settlement is finalized on a rainy Thursday. No admission of wrongdoing. That standard line cities love. But the number is real. $2.4 million. The figure becomes a symbol. Some people think it's too high. Some people think it's too low. Jordan thinks of it differently. He thinks of it as a receipt for the moment the city's systems failed, a receipt for the bruise on his wrist, a receipt for the fear he swallowed so he wouldn't be labeled, a receipt for the public trust that got damaged on camera. Alongside the money, there are policy changes, a directive about verifying professional credentials during stops, your new training on de-escalation, a supervisor review requirement for certain detentions. In public statements, the department says all the right words: commitment, transparency, learning, moving forward. But Jordan doesn't measure change in statements. He measures it in behavior. He measures it in whether the next person in a uniform is treated like a threat or like a human. After the settlement, Jordan goes back to work, because this is the part people don't understand. Even when you win, you still have a life. You still have bills. You still have shifts. You still have patience. And some days, Jordan walks into an emergency room and sees an officer standing near triage. The officer sees him too. Sometimes the officer nods. Sometimes the officer looks away. Jordan doesn't make speeches. He does his job. But something has changed in him. Not bitterness, clarity. He starts training new EMTs at the station. He teaches them how to read a scene, how to speak calmly, how to protect themselves, and yes, how to survive interactions with police while remaining professional. Because that's reality. He doesn't phrase it like politics. He phrases it like safety. Your hands matter, he tells them. Where you put them, how you move, how you narrate. It shouldn't be necessary, but it is. Some trainees nod. Some look uncomfortable because they want the world to be fair by default. Jordan knows fairness often arrives only after evidence, and that's what the body cam was. Evidence. The camera didn't make the stop happen. It made the stop visible. A year later, Jordan is invited to speak at a community safety forum. He agrees, but on one condition. He wants a police supervisor on stage with him. Not as an enemy, as a counterpart. Sergeant Rains shows up. She sits beside him, in uniform, in front of a crowd. Jordan tells the story the same way he told it in court. Calm, precise. He doesn't embellish. He doesn't scream. He says, I was tired. I was going home. I was in uniform. And I got handcuffed because someone decided I didn't match what they thought a paramedic should look like. Rains nods. Then she says, it shouldn't have happened. Some people in the crowd clap, some don't. Some people want punishment, some people want reform, some people want to forget. But Jordan doesn't want forgetting. Forgetting is how patterns survive. Here's what the body cam ultimately teaches. A camera does not create morality. It reveals it. It shows who escalates, who listens, who respects, who dismisses. It shows whether words like officer safety are being used as a shield or as an excuse. And in Jordan's case, the footage showed something painfully simple. There was no emergency. There was no threat. There was no reason for cuffs that couldn't have been solved with verification. But the cuffs happened anyway. And that's why the city paid. Not to buy Jordan's silence. To end the risk of the story continuing in front of a jury. In the final months of the case, Jordan's attorney asked him one question that stuck. If the camera hadn't been on, the attorney said, what do you think would have happened? Jordan didn't answer right away, because the answer is heavy, because the answer is the shadow behind every stop. Finally, Jordan said, they would have said I was aggressive. He paused. Or they would have said I resisted. He paused again. And nobody would have argued with them. That's the real terror, not what happened. What could have been written into the record if the video didn't exist? So when people see the $2.4 million figure and ask, why that much? There's a different question hidden underneath. How much is the truth worth when the truth is the only thing that stands between you and a narrative you can't control? Jordan didn't become rich. Taxes, attorney fees, life. But he did something important with what remained. He funded a scholarship program for EMT trainees from low-income neighborhoods. He paid for tuition, textbooks, certification fees, because he wanted more first responders, more people trained to help, more people who could step into chaos and bring order. And also, quietly, more people who understood that uniforms are not magic. They don't protect you from assumptions. They don't protect you from bias. They don't protect you from someone's decision in a dark moment. But evidence can, accountability can, community attention can. And that's why we tell these stories. Not because they're comfortable, because they're instructive. If you remember anything from this, remember the image. A man in a paramedic uniform, hands up, on a dark road, saying, I'm just trying to get home. And a voice answering, step away from the vehicle, now. That's not just one bad stop. It's a snapshot of how power behaves when it thinks nobody is watching. But the camera was watching. And once the public watched too, the city couldn't pretend it was nothing. Because the uniform should have meant something. And the ID should have meant something. The truth should have meant something. And the fact that it didn't is exactly why the body cam became a $2.4 million problem. So I'll leave you with the question Jordan asked himself the night he finally watched the footage. Not, why did this happen to me? But who does this happen to when there's no camera? Think about that. And if you've got a story, something you witnessed, something you lived, drop it below. Because the only way patterns break is when people refuse to let them stay invisible.
Thank you for your time. Should this video have broadened your understanding, please support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to Justice Insight Cam. Keep yourself informed, stay safe, and await our upcoming broadcast.